Professor. Mr. Stewart.
What are you trying to do to me? This is, I'm going to show you something. It was 600 pages. Look at the font. What do you got? I'm an old man. I had to pore over this with a magnifying glass and a microscope just to be able to see, and I only got up to Reconstruction. You know what? Can I tell you why? Normally, I get the books from the authors that are coming on the show, and they're dry, and I can skim them. Your writing is so vivid and so interesting that I actually had to pay attention. And it slowed me down.
I'm really sorry. I could do an alternate account that's just the dry version.
Do not. Okay. Because what I learned, it's fascinating to me, the process of just writing the Constitution was it was this 20-year meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, which we think of it as something that is almost divine, inspired on Mount whatever and handed down to people. It's not. It was a series of like zoning board meetings.
Yeah, it really was. It took a long time to figure out the whole premise of constitutionalism. I mean, we think, next year we're celebrating the nation's 250th anniversary because we're marking the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, 1776, but that's also the year the first constitutions were written in what was the United States. And it's not till 1787 that we get the Constitution that we have inherited as the federal Constitution. But all those years in between are just people like, what if we didn't have a governor? Or, what if we elected our state Supreme Court? Or what if we granted the right to vote to everybody? Like, people are just debating and trying out different things. Or what if we let the people write the constitutions? What if we wrote them ourselves but told them they had to agree to them? No, that's not going to work. Like, it's just a series of experiments.
Right. And by the way, not on Zoom. Like, these guys, like, everything is like, what if we did this? And then they put in 50 amendments and did it. And then, like, they'd send a guy in a wagon, and it would take him, like, 8 weeks to go, like, yeah, they said no.
There was one time, there was a constitution, maybe it was Pennsylvania, where there was a draft.
Have you not read this?
No, I forgot it all.
How far did you get in this book?
I forgot it all. There was a state constitution that was written, and then it went into the towns for ratification, but by the time they called for the vote, the printed copies of the Constitution hadn't reached the towns yet. Like, it's actually just really hard to travel. Like, think of Western Pennsylvania or Western Massachusetts.
Sure.
It just takes a long time to get around.
And also, there was a discussion, as you lay out, of who was even allowed to weigh in, and should it be property owners or just white gentry or people who paid enough in certain taxes, and all these different things. But what it does is I don't want to say humanizes, but it's a product of administration, and it was almost a bureaucratic process. Whereas I viewed it more as a moral process previously. And I think it was infused with morality. But even then, boy, they're very aware of slavery's shadow. And they make no bones about it.
Yeah. I think it's far more sort of contingent and accidental than we probably carry around in our head the idea of, there was this bunch of guys in knee breeches in Philadelphia, and the sun came through a window, and George Washington said, ta-da, and there was the Constitution. And it's like, there is that moment, right? There's famous speeches at the end where, Franklin says, like, I consent to this Constitution, sir, because although I don't think it's the best that we have. And, there is that. There are a lot of, like, iconic moments in the history of the Constitution.
Right.
But there's just a mess all before it that involves a lot of things like people who were enslaved sending petitions to their state legislature saying, oh, when you're writing the Constitution, by the way, please end slavery. It is completely inconsistent with the philosophy on which this country is being founded. So, I wrote the book because I just wanted to recover this, much messier, more contingent, a lot of agitation. There's a bureaucratic part of it, but then, these guys are meeting in conventions, and, at the time they called everybody who was agitating who's not in the constitutional conventions in the states and in Philadelphia, the people out of doors. And it's like, we are the people out of doors.
We are all out of doors.
We are the outdoors
the other
people.
thing is, there are a lot of women's conventions
Yeah.
who get together and they draw up
Yeah.
their own things, and they talk about how this Constitution. I thought there's a really interesting area in here where you talk about the protection of women, and sort of they discuss it as literal rape, as though because British soldiers who had been in there and had been quartered in Americans' houses would, and so they viewed this as a way of protecting women and viewing the country in that same way.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this whole, I mean, the reason we have like Lady Liberty, or, you know, there's also Britannia, right? That we have these allegorical women that represent the nation. There is a way in which in the Revolutionary era, women were always figured as the victims of British oppression, allegorically, like the rape of America by Parliament is this like the most popular woodcut of the time, or engraving of the time. But there also was a lot of rape that women dealt with during the Revolutionary War, as is the case in all wars.
Right.
And so
as a weapon of war that they would use.
Right.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
when you read, okay, so there were no women at the Constitutional Convention, but all those guys had wives and sisters and mothers and daughters who were writing to them and expressing their views. Like one of my favorites is Benjamin Franklin's sister, who writes to Franklin and says, like, I hope while you're down there in Philadelphia with those wise men, she's being a little bit ironic.
Right.
I hope you remember to turn the swords into plowshares. Like, I'm not down with like celebrating war in your new code of laws.
I thought Adams writes to his wife.
Yeah.
He gets a little cheeky.
Yeah, he's a bit of a git.
He's a bit of a git, but he does. He almost, in some ways, because she's very clearly pushing for, I guess, what you would imagine to be. Maybe not the rights of women. I don't know.
Yeah, well, she says, look, like all men would be tyrants if they could. That's the principle on which the country's founded, right? Like,
that's right.
Like power corrupts.
That's
so
right.
We have to have checks and balances. We have to write down our laws that limit the role of government and document the rights of the people, because left to nature, all men would be tyrants if they could. So she's like, also husbands are also going to be tyrants. So we need to have rights. Please don't forget to grant rights to women. And he writes back, you know, as to your new code of laws, madam, I cannot but laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet she wanted to hit him in the face with a frying pan.
She writes to her friend Mercy Otis Warren, who's like, what about if we wrote a petition to Congress? Like, let's do this together.
Right.
And I found that really tantalizing. I'd never come across that letter. Everybody knows the kind of Abigail Adams letter to John, that exchange is kind of
Everybody,
famous.
no, Harvard professors know
no
that.
people know that.
Here's what everybody knows. The founders created 3 co-equal branches of government, and then there was Vietnam. Like, nobody has any idea about any of this. I think that's the point. And the point is, there is a danger in not knowing this, because it allows us to make presumptions and assumptions that lessen the work that we have to do to make change. You know, you talk a lot about this in terms of amendments that the founders put into place through Article 5, the idea that this was not the end-all be-all document, that it was going to have to be changed. And by not understanding what their thought process was leading up to it, I think we've lost sight of what that amending process should be.
Yeah, and just the commitment to it. I mean, I was really struck. I hadn't thought that much, honestly, about amendment. I, like most people, to the degree that I had a kind of history of the Constitution in my mind, is really a succession of Supreme Court cases. Oh, well, there was Dred Scott. I know about that one. You know, there's Lochner, Brown v. Board of Education, Roe,
Oh, my God,
Dobbs.
I could teach at Harvard.
Right? Like, those are, you're like, okay, I got
I know
that.
those, too.
That's right. That's what you kind of think. Like, okay, the
Yes.
Supreme Court just decides, and that's what the Constitution is. And that's kind of how it's taught, too, right? In law school, that's how it's taught. Like, just a list of cases. But when I went back and did this research, it's like, wow, like, you know, the philosophy of amendment, the idea that we can make our lives and our government better and more responsive to the needs of the people, is actually the foundational principle of written constitutionalism. If you're going to write it down, that's great. Then everybody can read it. Like, that's really important. But you have to have a way to change it.
Right.
And there really was no provision that the Supreme Court would be changing. I mean, that's a practice that evolved and is now, considered standard and part of our constitutional tradition. But the philosophy of amendment is the thing that we abandoned. And it's, it's hard, but even if you didn't have like a list of amendments you wanted. The idea of it is actually so beautiful. That is the moral idea, right? It's like this commitment to mending. Like the word itself, kind of the 18th century meaning of it is like inseparable from mending, like repairing a textile, like
and convening,
like making amends, mending your ways, like these kind of deep ways of thinking about, shouldn't we be able to make things better? Just because we've written them down, does that mean we can't still aspire to make things better?
Do you think that we have grown to use the Supreme Court as a moral crutch because the process of amending is so arduous? You know, it took the Civil War for them to decide that black people should be able to vote. And then certainly, you know, Jim Crow South pulled that all back. You know, and women at the time were like, wait a minute. So black men get to vote, but women don't get to vote. And then it took till the 20s, till that happens with the suffragette movement. Have we lost sight of what it takes to organize in a meeting to meeting, grassroots, relentless effort to create a lasting, because an amendment, you can pass a law, but a law can be repealed. An amendment is different. Is that what we've lost?
An amendment is different, and many of our amendments overrule Supreme Court decisions. That's what they were for in the first place. Like the Supreme Court strikes down a congressional law to establish a federal income tax, says that's not in the Constitution, Congress doesn't have that power. Ultimately, we get the 16th Amendment in 1913 that says, okay, Congress can have this power. And without an amendment, many gains are just reversible. They can be overruled by the Supreme Court. They can, like if you think about like environmental protection, right? 1970, Nixon says it's the environmental decade. I'm going to be the environmental president, and we get the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, National Environmental Protection Act. All those things are being rolled back. Like those were not constitutionalized. They're really important laws, and they had really important consequences. But there was a proposal for a constitutional amendment guaranteeing environmental protection as a constitutional right. And it doesn't get anywhere this time. That's sort of the last moment when we really were able to still amend the Constitution. So you think about that, like, would it be a different world if that had been constitutionalized? But
it probably goes both ways. I mean, I would imagine
totally both
that,
ways.
you know, look, we could argue Roe v. Wade did a similar thing, which is why I think people now view those, what they might have considered to be rights, as being vulnerable, because I think they're realizing, oh,
the courts is
the
not
Supreme
the final
Court.
solution,
I mean, look at the shadow docket that they're literally like on one-page thing going like, the president can just take billions of dollars, and as long as it's for like foreign money, he can just take.
I mean, it's a little bit like you're you know, the reductionism of the mass shooting analysis, where you're going to just say, was it a red shooter or a blue shooter?
I'm sorry, I don't watch this show. I don't care for it. So I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, I think, you know...
No, it's reductive.
It's reductive. It's like, okay, so it's just generally the case, sadly, people aren't as principled as you'd wish. Like, if conservatives are not in power in the court, then they seek constitutional amendment, and they think the court shouldn't be making decisions.
So
and when liberals are not in power in the court, they suddenly want to talk about constitutional amendments, and they don't think the court should be making decisions.
Are we all originalists when we're not holding the power? Is that how originalism works?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. I wasn't sure.
No.
All right.
No. We can be intellectually inconsistent without being originalists.
Oh, okay. All right.
Those are two different forms.
They are. Because that's what the originalists would say, is it not? Is that the amendment, because they placed it in there, if you don't use the amendment, you can't do anything. Yeah.
So originalism is not original. It's not the original method of interpreting the Constitution. It's a political product of the 1970s and 1980s.
Right.
When
the term, maybe.
The term, no, but also the idea.
Even the thought process.
Yeah, even the thought process.
Oh.
Earlier courts didn't really say, let's go back and consider what, Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention said, in order to understand whether there could be AK.
So they understood themselves as living in a time and being politically part of the moment.
Yeah, they were working. I mean, there were a lot. Again, like it's brand new. Like they're working out. Well, how are we going to interpret this thing? Like they're working it out. There's different kind of competing theories, and they change over time. But the originalism that dominates the Supreme Court today really begins around 1971, and it is fiscal and social conservatives who opposed to the decisions of the Warren Court, like starting with Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, and they've said, oh, that's judicial. This is like
Judicial activism.
Judicial activism, they're legislating from the bench. You should never do that. You should never do that. If you want to change the Constitution, you should try to amend it. And they try to amend the Constitution, but they don't have the votes. They want a right to life amendment. They want a balanced budget amendment. They don't have the votes. So then they were like, oh, you know what? We do want to change the Constitution. We're going to take over the federal judiciary. But we've been saying for decades that you can't legislate from the bench. So we have to have a way to have our new judiciary appointees be able to change the Constitution without seeming to be changing the Constitution. So they said, well, what we're doing is we've devised this new judicial interpretation that we're not changing the Constitution, we're restoring it to its original meaning. So it's a way to change the Constitution while pretending that you're not, disguising it as restoration.
What's so interesting about that, too, it seems, is, so if you say, well, there is an amending process, right, that allows us to change the Constitution, so you have to use that because that's what the founders put in there. But as you show in the book, the amendment process wasn't something that they held sacrosanct. Again, the amendment process was born of a very messy, sometimes conflicting administrative and bureaucratic process. Even that was compromised for a variety of different reasons. So I don't even know that you can point to the amendment process. It seems like the Supreme Court, Marbury versus Madison, was the moment they went, there is no originalism, because in the Constitution, there is no, only the Supreme Court gets to interpret constitutionality, and there certainly is no amendment in the Constitution that suggests that. So didn't we leave that ship in 1803, or is that the wrong way of thinking of this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's no pulling back judicial review. There's maybe.
I just mean by doing judicial review, you've removed yourself from originalism because that's not in there.
Yes, fair enough.
Good night. Oh, okay. For real?
Yeah, for real.
Did I just get a B?
No. You know, no one gets B's anymore, John. I don't know.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Paying attention?
I forgot about that. That's when the parents come in. How dare you? I spent $300,000 a year at this stupid college.
I don't know the letter B anymore. My alphabet stops with A.
It's really, you know what? It's awful, isn't it?
It's awful. Yeah, it's embarrassing and inexcusable.
Can you even write "see me" on the thing, or no? Even that's over.
No, that's sort of suggestive, I think, is the problem.
It is, right? You can't do anything anymore. Oh, poor Democrats. Is the idea of putting this out there then to give us a sense of the roadmap and the inconsistencies so that we no longer view things through a more orthodox or fundamentalist lens? Like, it is this, as opposed to, no, it became that because of all these other tributaries. And is that instructive for people as we move forward?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's important to have a more democratic past if you want to have a more democratic future, right? You have to see, like, there's a world of people who are agitating for different kinds of change. Like, not like all change is great. Like, a lot of the people that I write as character sketches in this book have constitutional ideas that I think are horrible.
Right.
But they really worked hard on them, and they really influenced the court in doing so, even if, they didn't get their amendments through, or maybe they did. Some of them they did. We just actually need a more complex and richer account of how Americans have viewed the Constitution so that it doesn't seem immutable. Not to say we shouldn't care about it, we shouldn't value it, we shouldn't want to uphold it, we shouldn't want to hold our leaders accountable to it, but that at the end of the day, it is actually our Constitution. And I think we have really forgotten. I would say most Americans don't even know the U.S. Constitution can be amended. It hasn't really happened lately. And even state constitutions, we don't hold conventions anymore. I think that the things that people fought and died over a revolution for, and, the 750,000 Americans who died in the Civil War were fighting a constitutional argument too. Like, I think we just need a better account of that to get our bearings. In the same way, like, in a marriage, you kind of need to know, like, your family history. Like, you have like an account of the past.
Wow, that took a weird turn, Jill.
Okay.
That took a super. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Just in your daily life, like, you think historically all the time about how did I get there with this friendship? Like, oh my God, this person, 20 years ago we had this fight and we're still fighting over that.
Sure, no, yep, we all think that way.
Okay, maybe that failed. I'm sorry.
I love it because it reminds people that democracy is a participatory sport. And that when you go through that, you see this is about, and the more people that participate, we won't always be pleased with the outcome, but you have to be invested in the process. And boy, what a valuable thing. Although still my favorite piece of information in this entire book is that the Federalist Society, which are generally the legal theory of originalism, altered the logo of James Madison that is their logo.
Yeah.
Because they thought the nose looked too big.
It's kind of awesome. Also, it was Robert Bork's son, I think, who was like, this silhouette, he's a fairly unattractive man.
I love it. The book is called We the People. It's available now. And again, I can't tell you, just the writing is so vivid and engaging and wonderful. It would have been so much easier to skim this bad boy if you were a lesser writer, but you are not. And it is fantastic. And I thank you for even taking the time. Jon